You're watching Apostolic Radio Charlotte.
God bless you all. I love you. Today I am going to try to talk about the subject of good communication for a little while. Communication is unique in that your ability or lack of ability in it will affect every single area of your life. If you are a poor communicator, it will hurt your friendships. It will hurt your family relationships. If you're a poor communicator, it will put trouble in your marriage if you're married. And believe it or not, if you're a poor communicator, it'll even give you trouble in your career. On the other hand, if we can learn some good communication habits and disciplines, sometimes the disciplines are the most important, it can be a blessing in all of those areas. In fact, I can think of almost no area of our lives where communication is unimportant, or we can take it for granted. It is very important. And not surprisingly, like any subject that is that powerful, the Bible has quite a lot to say about it. Let me give you a quick example. About 6 months ago, director of public relations for a large corporation decided to open a Twitter account, and I won't say her name. She is a private citizen. I'm sure she wouldn't be excited about being an illustration on a Sunday morning service, so I won't say her name. Her story, however, is in the New York Times over the weekend, which is a much worse place to be. She only had 170 followers. She had just started it, and she was trying to be funny, and she started making texts trying to be funny. And she got on a flight to South Africa. Her family was from South Africa. She herself was white, and I'll explain that in a moment. Her family was white. But on the plane, one of the jokes before she took off that she tried to make, it was such an absurd statement that she never dreamt that anyone could take it literally. She thought she was making a funny critique of the great benefits of the wealthy West, the developed nations. She thought it would be obviously read as a social critique. Or if not that, at least it would be in the manner of an absurd comedian. A comedian to get on the stage and they can get away with things that you and I cannot get away from. They're in a special context. Society gives them a pass. They can say words you and I can't say. They can make comparisons you and I can't make. They're a comedian and society gives them a pass. She was not a comedian. She was a public relations person. She didn't get to make certain kind of jokes. She made a mistake. She made a joke, and somebody who had a lot of followers, who knew she was a kind of a corporate bigwig, picked up on it and retweeted it, critiquing her, saying, "This is a shame." He read it literally. Now, he knew she didn't mean it literally, but she had made a mistake in the media age. She was on an 11-hour flight to South Africa. Within a couple hours, it was the #1 trending tweet on Twitter. Shortly after that, her company she worked for, whose name I will not say, made a post saying, "We abhor this statement. We do not approve of this. We are against it." She became the #1 tweet. Her friends started calling her obsessively, sending her message after message, delete it, delete it, delete it. And she was on a plane. She was asleep. She had no idea. Pretty soon, spontaneous trends started to spin out of her trending tweet. And they started having when she lands jokes and parties. And the hashtag that said the worst phone-on party ever started trending. And when she landed in South Africa, she turned on her phone to literally thousands of messages, one of which was telling her she was fired. And she went to the hotel where she was staying, and they told her they would not let her stay there. The unions had threatened to strike. The hotel workers if she was allowed to stay there. She went to her family's house, and they had been long-term supporters of the same political party in Nelson Mandela was founded, and so they were quite liberal. She did not intend it this way, but it didn't matter because reality doesn't matter. Perception is what matters in a media age. And she literally watched her whole world burn down. She said she couldn't stop crying for 24 hours. She said she thinks she cried her body weight in 24 hours. She deleted her posts. She deleted her account. It was too late. Then hashtags started going about how your tweet is in infamy forever. There's no escape. Because of the mob mentality of media where you get to be mean behind a persona and you're not held to your meanness. The bullying just went out of control. She had lost everything because of one tweet on Twitter. If you're interested in the story, you can look at the Weekend New York Times. She's interviewed 6 months later. She still has not recovered. She's gone from job to job. She says she took a job in Ethiopia working for a nonprofit just as a way to trying to atone, and that was made fun of. And she's single. She can't date anyone. She said because who doesn't Google the people they date nowadays? And she said no one dates her. Well, no one will hang out with her, all because of a stupid tweet 6 months ago. Wow. Good communication matters. Since I told you a sad story, let me tell you a joke. It's a silly joke, but hey, I'm in the mood. Judge was interviewing a woman concerning her pending divorce, and he said, "What are the grounds for your divorce?" She said, "Well, the grounds are about 4 acres and a little house in the middle of the property." He said, "No, I mean, what's the foundation of the case?" She said, "Well, I think it's concrete." He said, you're not understanding. What are your relations like? She said, "Well, I have an uncle and aunt living in town." He said, no. What's the grudge here? She said, "Well, we have a 2-car carport." Finally, he said in frustration, "Lady, why do you want a divorce?" She said, "I don't want a divorce. My husband wants a divorce. He says he can't communicate with me." Well, silly, okay. I get one, right? I get one silly joke a month. After that, you find me or something. I get it. Communication matters. In the Bible, you'll find several stories where a person without much power has to stand in the gap for others, and the only way they can do it is to communicate in an appropriate manner. I won't get into all the stories, but I've heard some great teaching on preaching, as a matter of fact, using examples of people who had to use communication. Probably the most famous is Esther. Although she was queen, she was not even allowed to go into the king's presence unannounced. Quite powerless, yes? And she needs to represent the current crisis that is happening to her people, which is the persecution brought against them by Haman. And finally, it works out where she takes the chance and she has to tell King Xerxes what is going on. And she does so very carefully. He asks, "What is your request?" And she says, "If you're pleased with me and you will grant my request, I petition that the lives of myself and my people would be spared, for my people and I have been sold to those who would kill, slaughter, and annihilate us. If we had only been sold as slaves, I could remain quiet. That would have been a matter too trivial to warrant disturbing the king. But it's more than that. Our lives are being threatened." And Xerxes says, "Who would dare touch you? Who would do such a thing?" And she says, "The wicked Haman is our enemy." That's New Living Translation. My paraphrase of it. She has to say it right, because if she says it wrong, then she is really has no power to defend, and she does so. So what does the Bible say about good communication? As you would expect, the Bible gives a whole lot more warnings about just silly or careless communications than it does about principles for speaking. As if to say, most of the battle is just learning when to be quiet. Smile at your neighbor. Say, "Oh, he's preaching to you today." I overuse that joke, but hey, it's always funny to me because I am preaching to you today. I was making a joke with my wife this morning. I said, people say, "How did you know to preach to me?" And I said, "Honey, I just think, what does my wife need this week?" And whatever it's a joke. I'm just cutting up. She's a perfect woman. Happy Valentine's Day. You can kick me after church. Good communication matters. Let me give you a few things just to think about. Proverbs one passage of Scripture, this is Proverbs, we're told that death and life are in the power of the tongue. That's heavy. That's not like try to talk good most of the time to most of the people. No, that's heavy. Death and life are in the tongue. And Proverbs also talks about how, in Matthew 12 also, we will give an account for every idle word, which is a good way to make everyone obsessively fearful and think of all the silly things they have said. We must take it seriously. James, who is always good for practical Christian advice, tells us in his first chapter, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath." No one in the history of the world has ever said, "I listened before I thought." No, what we say is, "I spoke before I thought." Let us be swift to hear. Let us be slow to speak. I would say most of the relationships that are ruined, if you look back over time, it wasn't so much an event as it was the communication that preceded and followed that event. The only way we can know the other person's heart is through good communication. Even if your heart is good, if you don't communicate it, we cannot know, because we are not mind readers. We are not palm readers, hopefully. We do not have some psychic interpretation of another person's actions. All we can know is what they give us through communication. And so the first biblical principle that you'll find mentioned multiple times is, let us be swift to hear. Proverbs again, and I love Proverbs, so I often reference it, especially in life class. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is a folly and a shame to him. This is not so much something that we do intentionally as we do as a matter of efficiency. We assume, we leap ahead in communication and assume we know what the person is talking about. And then we sum it up and we try to foreshorten the communication as an efficient thing, not so much trying to put words in their mouth. We just jump ahead of them. I am quite guilty of this. I often find myself in meetings where we're time constrained. I either have another person waiting on me, or I have a service about to begin, and I often find myself listening to the person and thinking to myself, I don't need to know the color of the vehicle, just what happened, or some version of that, because we only have a short amount of time. Let's edit on the fly. Well, that can lead me to error, and there's also the fact that it's true to my personality to be impatient, and so I am one who needs to sit before the teaching today. And I need to remind myself that if you speak to a matter before you hear, or shall we say understand the matter, we set ourselves up for folly, pain, suffering, and misunderstanding. We must be swift to hear. And let me read from Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I think most of you are familiar with, and a good number of you have possibly read. If you haven't read it, I'd recommend it to you if you are willing to do so. I think it's a foundational book on personal effectiveness. My dad made me read it before I was the age of 13 for school credit. Yes, I am not kidding. Quote, "We've spent years learning how to read and write, years learning how to speak. But what about listening? What training or education have you had that enables you to listen so that you really deeply understand another human being from that individual's own frame of reference?" God help us all, because we all could do better on this. We must not simply try to understand. We must try to understand from their context, because there are always two truths. There is the objective truth, which is always up for debate, and there's the subjective truth. So when someone says, "You are a liar," they're not necessarily saying you are a liar. They're saying it feels like you are a liar. It seems like you are a liar, but we get those mixed up. We say, "When did I lie? When did I lie? Tell me when. Write down the date." Which is to entirely miss the point. Men, I know how to preach to men. I just preach to myself, and I hit all y'all for free. what can we do? What kind of a mindset? What can we do to do better in these things? This is Proverbs 18 again, and this is probably one of my top 10 favorite scriptures in the Word of the Lord. It's got to be top 10, maybe top 5. Proverbs 18:2. A fool has no delight in understanding, but in expressing his own heart. People love to have opinions about things that they know nothing about. They know nothing about it. Does that temper their opinion? No. In fact, the less they know, the louder they shout. Which is why I personally hate politics, but moving along. We are all taught to express ourselves as a justification of self, as a manifestation. It's our own version of existentialism. I am, I'm here, I'm me, you must listen. No, we must not listen. We should listen, but you're not going to make us. And so self-expression becomes easy to us. It becomes the indulgence of self. Understanding, that's hard work. There's no shortcuts to understanding. You have to want to understand. You have to listen. You have to learn. You have to read. You have to observe. You have to want to understand. Running your mouth, that's just human. You get it for free. Paul said this through the letter to Philippians. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look not only for his own interests, but also the interests of others. So, real quick, handful of tips for becoming better listeners. I give these to myself here today. If you want to listen along, that's fine. Look at the person when you're listening to them. It's not a stare down, but look, pay attention. Ask questions to show you're interested and clarify things that you aren't sure of. Try to identify common emotional ground, how it feels to be them, not just what they're saying, but how it feels to be them. Try to block out distractions. I confess that this is hard for me, particularly before, during, and after church. I am all about the distractions. I have to, in some sense, be responsible for most of the stuff that goes on around here, so forgive me and be indulgent with me in that context. Be careful not to simply rehearse what you're going to say next while listening to what they're saying now. I think this is one of the most common errors we make. Listen, stop, try to understand what they're saying and how it feels to be them. If they express very strong feelings, try to understand and acknowledge the feelings without joining them in the feelings. Somebody in the conversation needs to stay level-headed. So the second principle we read earlier, the first was to be swift to listen. The second one was to be slow to speak. Now, this is not so much an admonition to silence. I know you can take it that way. You can take it literally, where you think literally the only thing to do is to be silent. However, I think there's deeper than that. Sometimes to take a scripture only literally is to take it unseriously. There is depth to it. There is a literal point to it. There is a symbolic point to it. There's a depth in the scripture. It's not just one level. So, what I mean by that is, if David wouldn't have been talkative, we wouldn't have 150 Psalms. You see what I'm saying? So, the issue is not just how much you talk. I think it's the care with which you talk about certain subjects. If you're talking about the glory of the Lord, you should talk a lot and often. You see what I'm saying? It's a good subject. It's an edifying subject. There are some subjects on whether or not your neighbor is going through trouble. That you shouldn't be quick to talk about that. Why? How would you know? You're not your neighbor. Besides, you got troubles. Your breath stinks in the morning. It's not just them. You see what I'm saying? Those are subjects whereby we should be slow to speak. Well, what do you think about brother so-and-so? Well, I try not to think about brother so-and-so. The point I'm having fun with here is there's a certain subject, and don't act like you don't have some sense. I know you've been trying for years to convince me, but you have some sense. And that's a joke. I'm having fun. You usually know. In fact, I would say most of the time the problem with us isn't knowledge, it's discipline. It's not knowing what to do, it's having the courage to do it. Because it's just so much honking fun to pop off about what they did, said, went, etc. Wow. All right, but the same measure you mete it out with, it's coming back to you. And I didn't say that, the Lord said it, so knock yourself out. Psalms 141, take control of what I say, O Lord, and keep my lips sealed. 141 and 3, Psalms. Psalms 19:14, may the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. David's point is not that his lips should be sewn shut. Obviously, he's got 150 Psalms to write. His point is, let me to speak with care and respect. Let me have the proper communication. We can't get through life without communicating. The trick is to do it right. Proverbs 10 and 19 clarifies that it's usually a multitude of words that causes the problem. But here again, Psalms is almost 30-something chapters long. I mean, the point is not that, you do it all in one chapter. The point is that we have judgment and wisdom about the things that we should say and the things that we should not say. So a good discipline for us is to ask ourselves, do we need to have an opinion? One of the great blessings of maturity is the day you realize you don't have to have an opinion about everything. Now, when you're young, you think you do. You think that it's, your personal existentialism. If I don't run off about this, then I'm not here. I don't exist. You're there. You exist. You just don't have to have an opinion about it. Moving along. What we choose to say should have a certain sound. We're trying to be people of faith, yes? We're trying to be Christians. Now, we're not perfect. But we're trying, and we're not just trying on Sunday. At least most of us aren't just trying on Sunday. I know some people seem that way, like Brother Dewan, but most of us are trying 7 days a week. You see what I'm saying? You're my new pick-on partner, brother. That's my version of a hug. Colossians 4 and 6, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. Philippians 4 and 8. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of a good report, if there's any virtue, if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Romans 12. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice. That's not one of my favorite scriptures, I have to say. My grandpa told me one time that some people just need a good cussing. And that was my grandpa. That wasn't my grandma. Although she kind of has a spirit from time to time. Man, I'm off the reservation today. Forgive me. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Bless and do not curse. Man, I don't like that verse scripture. Pick it. Let's move along since I'm mad about it. There should be a certain tone to our communication, a certain style to our talk. 1 Thessalonians 5, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. In other words, there's a relationship to our joy, our happiness, our confidence. There's a relationship to God's Spirit that is with us. And we must have, instead of just the habit of talking and speaking quickly and judgmentally, we need to have that kind of sweet presence that comes from being in the presence of the Lord. And the Lord help us all to do better in that particular manner. The flip side is the destructive habits, destructive forms of communication, from profanity to gossip to offensiveness. Truthfully, humor's dangerous, and I've learned this the hard way in my life because I like being funny, and funny's about taking chances. I do. One thing I found, if you want to wake up an audience, say something funny. They can be almost asleep, but even the folks who are almost asleep, they're a little irritated that they missed the joke. And so they wake up. And when you're about to lose an audience, you're being funny. You can draw them back. If they don't know you and they're all nervous, if you go to a real prissy church, you've been to some of them, and they just look at you like, we don't know if you have the fundamental doctrine, brother. If you can be funny, it breaks it. It really, really breaks it. I preached one time in St. Louis at one of the, I think at the time, it was the biggest church in St. Louis. Big, famous celebrity preacher, pastor. And that Sunday morning, they sat on me. They didn't do nothing. So I preached that Sunday night. I got up there and I started telling headquarters jokes. I just made them up on the fly. And they started laughing and falling out, and then they loved me after that. Humor is a great, powerful tool. It's like a shortcut between me and you. But it's dangerous. You take chances, and I have a recurring dream. I do. I have a recurring dream where I make a joke in church and nobody laughs and people start walking out. So I ask for apology in advance. It's sometimes hard to be funny under pressure. It's sometimes hard to wake the audience up under pressure. It's sometimes hard, and you take chances and you don't always get them right, but the Lord help us to get them mostly right. And I apologize in advance if I ever get it wrong. And for the times in the past I have got it wrong. But positive things for communication. A soft answer turns away wrath. If that's all you got out of today and you really took it seriously and applied it, you could revolutionize some relationships in your life. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. Or chapter 25 of Proverbs. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and settings of silver. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise rebuker to an obedient ear. Or Ephesians 4, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ. We really change everything when we try to communicate in a positive, healthy Christian way, by speaking clearly, by being respectful, by trying to identify to another person's viewpoint or context, quick to apologize, quick to forgive, not quick to cut someone off or interrupt. Lord help us all. Not one to just talk about other people's business just because you're bored with the own lack of drama in your own life, but quick to express appreciation and encouragement. Communication is fundamental, and it's often not taught. If you are in a career, and I'm almost done here, if you're in a career, there's some companies that are not on a they promote primarily from within. Certain companies, corporations, they primarily promote from within. And there's some companies quite famous for this. And you don't have to have some sheepskin. What you really have to be is just really good. And if you're really good at what you do, and then you can rise to the company. But what's amazing is the skills that they look for is not necessarily just technical skills. There's every successful leader in industry, there's people that work for them that are way more technically advanced than they are on any number of subjects. It's not that. It's the kind of things that's hard to teach. And one of those things is things like good communications. It's hard to teach, but if you have it, chances are you didn't learn it in college. Chances are you learned it at home by having good parents who taught you judgment and respect, kindness and care. But by having these kind of intangible gifts, you automatically place yourself in a different category of people. The kind of person who gets noticed for certain kinds of advancements. You see what I'm saying? And so it's not just a biblical principle. It's not just something whereby, well, bless God, we're going to do it, because if you don't, you're going to bust it wide open. That's not just a biblical thing. It's very much a life lesson and very much a personality, a reality. The person who has care and communication communication, they soon have blessings in almost every part of their life. They are better at their career, their marriages are better, their family relationships are better, their ability to teach and lead their children, that most important thing to all of us, it is better. It all starts with good communication. So, let me end with this. If you want to communicate, and it's a difficult subject and you don't know how, I would remind you first of all of the basics. Remember when you were in school and they were teaching you how to write who, what, when, where, and why? All of those same things apply to communication. You can say it at the right time. You can say it in the right way. You see what I'm saying? You can place it in its right context. And these are very important. So if it's important, don't rush off and open your mouth and let all the birds fly out. If it's important, figure out what you need to say before you start the avalanche. Because once the avalanche starts, it's not going to stop until the bottom of the hill. Figure out what you want to say, how you need to say it, why you need to say it. So what do you want to say? Why do you want to say it? How are you going to say it? How, in the middle of saying it, can you show your sincerity? How can you inspire trust? How can you inspire confidence? How can you let the other person know that you're not just making a position statement like a politician on a stump, but you really want to fix things? You want to take their concerns into account. You want to be fair to yourself. You want to be fair to them. How can you do it? Are you climbing an uphill battle because you've been dishonest in the past? If you have, start there, by acknowledging the fact that the relationship is damaged because you haven't always been truthful. Humility builds a bridge. Say, look, I know in the times past I've talked about these kind of things and I've done a poor job of it. And before I start on this subject, I'm going to apologize for the poor job I've done in the past. You humble yourself. People automatically soften towards you. On the other hand, if you show up like, I have told you before, well, maybe you might have to tell me again. You see what I'm saying? You brought it out. You summoned forth the demons. You're a sorcerer. You're a sorcerer. How many times do I have to tell you you're a sorcerer? Just summon those demons up. And then 6 months later show up in the preacher's office and say, I don't know why my relationship's so bad. Just keep summoning those demons up. Did I make my point? Let's move along. Listen. I made my point. So, if the Lord helps us, and we take it seriously, and we care enough to care, you say redundancy. Yes, we all need it. You care enough to care, to take your time to do it right. The Lord will give wisdom to the person who seeks it and searches for it. You want to say it right, you can say it right. And the truth is, you can say almost anything if you say it the right way. But you can say almost nothing if you say it the wrong way. All right, let's stand. Thank you very much. All right, in just a few minutes, we're going to start our worship service. Take a moment, take a break, greet somebody, sort your children out, whatever needs to happen. God bless you all.
Thank you for watching Apostolic Radio Charlotte. Come, worship with us.